We've got a one-of-a-kind interview today with a one-of-a-kind political activist, Debbie Dooley. She comes charging at an issue and anyone who opposes her with a take no prisoners attitude. And let me tell you, that attitude comes with some finger pointing, political trash talking, and powerful political hits that would make Coach Nick Saban of her beloved Alabama Crimson Tide proud. Growing up a preacher's kid, Dooley is never shy, and she will get in front of any microphone or behind any megaphone in no time flat. With nerves of steel, Dooley's Georgia Integrity Project unsuccessfully attempted to unseat then House Speaker David Ralston from his Blue Ridge district. Over time, she has taken on some more highfalutin titles, such as grassroots mobilization consultant. She has gone from leading the ultra-conservative battle cry as co-founder of the Tea Party movement, all the way to locking arms with people who register as socialist on the political spectrum through her creation of the Green Tea Coalition and the Conservatives for Energy Freedom organization. People have known Dooley for decades must think that they are dreaming when they see her up on stage with Nancy Pelosi's leftist DNC donor, Christine, speaking at a climate change conference. The investigative reporting outfit, the Georgia Record, made Dooley's employment with a climate alarmism NGO, the U.S. Energy Foundation, a public issue. We'll talk about that in this interview. This year, Dooley launched into state party politics with her figurative political guns blazing. As you would expect from Dooley, it became a street fight among two party factions. And when she did not hold back, people talked about it. At the end of the state party convention in June, Dooley posted a photo on Facebook smoking a victory cigar. We will also find out what her next cause will be. Love her or hate her, but you will always take her seriously and you will never forget her. Join us for a conversation with Debbie Dooley. Joined by Debbie Dooley. Debbie, great to have you on Editorial Interchange.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I love being on your show. You have a great show, and I share it in my emails.
Thanks,
a lot
Debbie.
of your episodes.
Well, thank you very much. And as you know, I'm sure that we always like to highlight local economies around Georgia.
Yeah.
And we always like to give a shout out to a locally owned business in your community. Do you have one that you'd like to shout out?
Sure would. I live in Cumming, Georgia, and there is a Greek Italian family owned for over 30 years restaurant that is in Cumming, Georgia. It's off of Georgia 400 exit 14. Great food. Their name is Giorgio's. They have great pizza. They have Greek Italian food. Everything you get in there is delicious. I haven't had anything yet that I didn't find scrumptious, and they're very reasonably priced. And this is not a chain or anything. This is family-owned restaurant, Giorgio's. It's in the
awesome.
same shopping center where Belk's is. Giorgio's in Cumming, Georgia, off of 20.
Well, if you're up in the Cumming area and you're hungry, you know where to go now. So no excuses. Thanks, Debbie.
Yeah.
We appreciate that. Hey, we go all the way back to 2012, the regional special purpose local option sales tax known as T-SPLOST. They were going to do regional sales taxes by congressional district. And that's how we first got connected, because we were both fighting that thing tooth and nail.
We absolutely were. In T-SPLOST, I will never forget, in January, we were going to vote on the T-SPLOST later on in the primaries, or the T-SPLOST. And in January, I went to the January before, in January 2012, I went to the state Senate and talked to I think his name was Tommy. He was the Senate Majority Leader, President Pro Tem of the Senate. And I said, look, you guys need to change that. you know, because we're not going to support it and we're going to work to kill it. And he said, well, you know, the Chamber of Commerce wants it. And a lot of these businesses want it and all that. And, you know, the governor was supporting it, lieutenant governor, the mayor of Atlanta were supporting it, and we're just going to pass the bill without making changes. And the Chamber of Commerce person, female, was in the room. And I said, okay, well, just letting you know, because I was friends, I said, we're going to kill it. And the Chamber of Commerce lobbyist looked at me and just laughed. In her arrogant way, she said, oh, do you think we've got $20 million? We've got the governor, lieutenant governor, the mayor of Atlanta supporting it. Do you really think you could kill it? And I said, watch. One word. I said, watch. And we did. We formed a coalition. I knew that it would be easier to defeat if we put left and right together and we worked together for a common goal. And that was one of these issues that it wasn't about left or right, it was about right or wrong. And I think the Sierra Club was part of our coalition. We had conservative Tea Party activists part of the coalition. We had, I think one of the labor unions was part of it, and the NAACP, part of the NAACP, one of the chapters, and then Senator Vincent Ford, which got, you know, he passed away. I disagreed with him politically, but he was a good man. And Senator Ford was part of that. And I can remember I had raised a little bit of money and we were all coordinating behind the scenes. And so Vincent calls me and he says, hey, do you think, you know, you've got some money, you're getting yard signs and t-shirts, do you think we could get some of them so he could pass out to his folks? I said, sure. So it was like you see in spy movies, those clandestine meetings where you stay hidden, you don't want anybody to know. So that's what we arranged. What happened is we found an alleyway in Decatur, and we behind a restaurant. So I pulled my car up. I had his stuff in the trunk. I didn't even get out of my car. He didn't come to my window. He just picked the stuff out of the trunk, took it and used it, and we destroyed them. We were focused on the metro. There were 12 T-SPLOST. We were focused mainly on the metro area, but a lot of what we were doing and a lot of the TV coverage spread out to areas outside Metro Atlanta. And it was, we were able to kill it, I believe, in 9 different regions. There were 3 that passed it, but we killed it. The big one was in Atlanta. And that was by all of us putting differences aside and working for a common goal. And it was highly successful that we did that. And you can bet the elected officials under the Gold Dome took notice of that.
Well, you know, and I said earlier that it was by congressional district, and that's wrong. It wasn't congressional district. It was by
Right.
metropolitan area, your standard metropolitan district. So it was all of metropolitan Atlanta. And in Fayette County, we just said, look, all we're going to get out of this is funding everybody else's projects. They're just finding a way to get money out of us for their stuff. But the interesting part about that was the take that they suggested, I think, was around $6.5 billion in Metro Atlanta that would raise. Half of that money was going to go to mass transit projects, and mass transit, even today, is still losing ridership and still failing, and they can't maintain it. But the one funny tactic that I use, because I did a lot of debates, and I did a debate in every county, and they invited us to do the debates because I thought they were going to slaughter us. But I had a map of all the projects with the mass transit stuff that they were going to do. And they had all these pretty yellow lines and red dotted lines and blue lines and all this kind of stuff like this. And I would point to the chart and I would say, does anybody want to do this project? It was bus rapid transit. and people would raise their hands. I said, this is a new light rail train. People would raise their hands. Who wants this red one? This is a metro bus service for these counties. They'd all raise their hands. I said, none of that happens. All you're going to get out of this is engineering, maybe some real estate acquisition, and other right-of-way acquisition, stuff like that. They're not going to build a single one of these projects. You could have seen the shock on people's face where they were just, they're lying to us. We're not going to get any of this stuff. And then my buddy Bob Ross had a big poster that he made. He got a picture of downtown Atlanta, and it was a picture from the air looking at the downtown connector area, right? The 75-85 connector. And he showed the picture with the traffic all lined up all the way down the connector. And he said, okay, this is what traffic looks like now. And here's what it looks like after the T-SPLOST stuff gets incorporated into the plan. And he shows the same picture, but he's taking out 2 cars. That was the total difference on a percentage basis. 2 cars out of all those hundreds of thousands of cars that you can see in a line. And ARC had to admit, you're right. I can't refute what you're saying. And so that could have been for Metro Atlanta, that could have been the largest financial scam in Georgia history. Yeah, could have been the biggest one.
Interesting. The NAACP, most of the conservatives, we opposed it because we felt that the mass transit was fiscally irresponsible because it didn't even build out the tracks. And we just felt like it was fiscally irresponsible. NAACP opposed it because the mass transit they had in it were in affluent neighborhoods and in affluent areas where you don't need mass transit because people aren't going to ride it, and they didn't put it in the poor areas. And that's one of the reasons the NAACP local chapter opposed it. And when we were doing press conferences, when we would talk to the press, and especially the press conferences, everybody heard a different reason why we opposed it, why our broad coalition opposed it. And everybody heard that, something they identified with. The Democrats would say, oh, there's not enough transit. We were, hey, it's fiscally responsible and we're paying enough taxes. And I can remember, and I think you saw it too, because we may have talked about it, and they were going, the TV stations would go to the MARTA train stations, and they would interview people, are you going to support the T-SPLOST? And this elderly African-American man, this black man, got up, he had gotten off the train. He said, no, I'm not going to support him. I'm not going to vote for it. I'm already paying too much in taxes. So that was something that's once in a blue moon that we came together and we actually beat the machine. We beat the political Chamber of Commerce machine. And that was a great victory for all of us.
It sure was. And I have never seen a stronger grassroots movement in metropolitan Atlanta on any other issues I have on that one. It was an absolute David and Goliath story, and we were a very small David, let me tell you, but it was fun working on that. Yeah. And I appreciate you doing all that. And we got a lot of good coverage. I'll end this part of the conversation with this was, they let me do op-eds in the AJC on the referendum. And I kept putting in op-eds and op-eds. And finally, one day, I called the editor of the paper on the phone. And I said, you're doing all these favorable articles for this T-SPLOST. He goes, yeah. I said, but there's no disclaimer. And he says, what's the disclaimer for? I said, your owner of that newspaper, the Cox family, just donated over $200,000 to help get the SPLOST approved. Now, I said, journalism ethics requires you to say that your newspaper is funding one side of this argument. And he begrudgingly, on the editorial page, put a disclaimer on one of their editorials one time. That was all he did. But I mean, the news coverage was so slanted even back then. It's really bad today, but it was getting bad over there. But the Cox family just, they just wanted to push it, and they used their paper to the fullest extent to get it passed.
They did, and I can remember election night during, the night we had a little watch party going on, and it was, I mean, everybody was coming to it, and although I think it was at Hudson's Midtown Grill in Atlanta, I can't remember the exact name. It's been 13 years, but we had it was jubilant, and the other side just we would watch it on TV and they were just like all doom and gloom. They know that we had kicked their butt on that. And
Well,
and that's grassroots in action.
give us some history. What was your first foray into politics?
I was a senior in high school and I was part of the leadership in the student council at my high school. And we had somebody came in and talked to us, and her name was Jean Sullivan. She was a National Republican National Committee woman at the time, and I was hooked. And she was running for mayor, and I volunteered for her campaign, and that was kind of like my first foray. But I grew up. I'm originally from Louisiana, and my grandfather, we call him Papa. My Papa was one of the mover and shakers in the political world in, the town and the area in Louisiana. When somebody wanted to run for office, they'd come to him. And I was interested in it. And I'm talking about 8 or 9 years old. He would take me to political rallies and all of that. And he never wanted to run for office, but he got me hooked on it. So there was that interest that was there. And he told me something that I still think about this day. He said that because I'd asked him, why don't he run for office or anything like that? And he told me something very profound that has stayed with me. You don't have to hold elective office to make a difference. He said you can make a difference by electing good people to office, and you can impact a wider area, because when you run and are elected to elective office, you're focused on being reelected and all that. And he just told me you can be far more influential by electing and helping good people in issues. And that's something that stayed with me to this day.
Well, let me ask this question. Was that high school Debbie Dooley that you just spoke about,
Yeah.
was she as outspoken and gung ho and telling it like it is as the Debbie Dooley today?
Absolutely. I wasn't as bold because I was just getting my footing, but I grew up, my dad was a preacher. So when you grow up a preacher's kid, we grow up tough because you want to prove to everybody, hey, I'm not my daddy and all that. So I grew up very tough. My boldness, my daddy was someone that you never, I mean, he would stand up for what's right, no matter how powerful someone was. And that's the role model. When my grandfather, my papa, and my daddy, they were my role models. And Jean Sullivan was too. She was former Republican National Committee woman from Alabama, but mainly my papa and my dad. And I was the oldest. I was a tomboy. I used to play football in the neighborhood. And I was one of the first ones that got picked by the team because I was so aggressive. And I just got that from my dad. And I still love football to this day, but I don't play anymore.
I don't doubt you were the first one picked. I have no doubt in my mind you were the first one picked. No, hey, let me ask you this: as a founder of the Tea Party,
Yeah.
what grade? And looking back over the years, what grade would you give the Tea Party organization in terms of promoting things and actually getting things accomplished? And Second half of that question is that organization still viable today?
Well, Tea Party Patriots, I still have Atlanta Tea Party and Main Street Patriots. Tea Party Patriots is doing excellent work. I will tell you that the Tea Party movement morphed into the MAGA America First movement. And in the early days, it was tough. We didn't have money. I mean, we would raise money for events. I was never paid by, in any of my work for the Tea Party. And we accomplished a lot. I mean, believe it or not, we had some growing pains. We had Koch brothers and a lot of these groups like that try to come in and co-opt us. We resisted that. I can remember that in the very early days that we actually had a discussion about whether or not we want to stay within the Republican Party and reform it, or whether or not we wanted to form a third party. And we decided it's a lot faster and better for us to reform the Republican Party. We did that. We had Sean Hannity at April 15, 2009, Tax Day Tea Party at the Capitol in Atlanta. We had over 20,000 people. Um, I helped organize. I was very active with Freedom Works at that time. I was a state director. And, we started working on the 9/12/2009 March on DC. We expected 50,000 people. We had over 1 million people there. When I walked, we had a pre-rally at, I think it was Freedom Plaza or Liberty Plaza, uh, before you get to the U.S. Capitol. And we were going to meet there and get people. We expected 50,000. We were going to meet there and just get people fired up and then march to the Capitol. When I got there at, I think it was like 9 o'clock, I literally froze in my track and I said, oh crap, except I didn't say crap. I said the S word. So I said, oh my God, because it was like we had 50,000 people, almost 50,000 people at the pre-rally. And we were up there on the stage and we were giving speeches and all that. And the Capitol Police came to us and said that you have reached critical mass. You need to start your march early. So we had to scramble. We had over 1 million people. We did not leave any trash. We cooperated with the Capitol Police. We told them everything that we were going to do. There was no trouble and not one bit of trash was left. Everybody threw it in the garbage cans. We left it clean. And that was an experience that I will never forget, sitting backstage looking at over 1 million people. And I mean, it was something I'll never forget, sitting backstage with a lot of the dignitaries, a lot of folks like that. We were backstage in awe at what we had accomplished. And I think it's great. The Tea Party has been successful because we changed the narrative. There were 22 of us that founded the Tea Party movement. I was one of 22. And I will tell you something I bet folks don't realize. In 2012, in that election, Donald Trump toyed uh, running for president then. He was considering it. He was on some of the Tea Party. I was a member. I joined the board of Tea Party Patriots in October of 2009. And Donald Trump in 2012 was on some of our calls. He wanted to chat with people. He actually helped sponsor a Tea Party rally in the Palm Beach area. And he decided not to run that year. And like I said, he started toying with the idea of running again in 2015. I was one of 10 people that met privately with him in Myrtle Beach at the Tea Party, the state Tea Party convention there. And I knew at that point if he got in, he was going to have my support because I got tired of elected officials, especially the Bush cabal. Uh, they made grand promises on the campaign trail, and once elected, nothing but grand excuses on why they couldn't do something. And I knew Donald Trump was the man that would change America. He was the man. I supported him, and I still support him to this day.
Well, one thing I noticed about you back from the Tea Party and still to today, you were a master when you got on either radio or television. You had mastered doing the soundbite. As a student of journalism,
Yeah,
um, you know, so many advocates, lobbyists for a cause, elected officials, so many of them don't know how to deliver a good soundbite. And you were good at it and the nice thing about it too was not only could you give them that nugget that they needed to put on the news or for that segment on the news broadcast, but you were defiant, kind of what Marjorie Taylor Greene is getting now, Boebert, Representative Boebert, all these women who were just going to say, look, I'm throwing all caution to the wind. I'm going to say exactly what's on my mind. I'm going to say what my heart thinks and what my mind's telling me to say, and I'm not going to worry about what anybody else has to say following it. And you did that incredibly well.
that Tea Party patriots did is they paid for us to have media training at Leadership Institute. And so, I took the class, and one of the things that they taught us is when you do an interview, you put down what thoughts you want to convey, and then you keep coming back to those same thoughts, and you just keep circling back. And you always have to give them little sound bites and give them what they want, so um, and they'll run with the story. And that's why media, I was in the AJC yesterday with interviews, but it is very easy. You just have to be calm. And here is a thing: it's never a friendly interview, except for you. But when you're dealing with the mainstream media, you always understand they are not your friends when they're doing the interview. So you don't talk to them like they're your good friends. And I have some friends in the media, including with AJC, but I don't talk, you know, just on the record and things. They're not, media is not your friend. Don't go in and talk like you and I are talking, or like you talk to your boyfriend or your wife or anything like that. Understand you're always on the record. And there are a lot of good folks in mainstream media. CNN is just not one of them, but there are a lot of good folks in there. But always remember, be cautious when you talk to the media.
And I think you have very similar to what Trump has done. You have the ability to look in the camera and confront the reporter and call them out for giving either a biased question or not or
Right.
missing the point altogether and stuff like that. Trump does that every day of the week now. And I think people were looking for somebody, especially during that Tea Party time. People were getting very despondent about government increases in taxation, very little representation, and that movement was just absolutely phenomenal. It was probably in our lifetimes, let's put it this way. I'm not going to say prior to our lifetimes, but in our lifetimes, probably the most monumental shift in Congress in our lives.
Right. And that was something we, in 2010, we worked. A lot of people don't realize that in the early Tea Party days, we didn't have a lot of money. I mean, we would raise for events and things like that. But I can remember in 2010, and we had worked hard for the Republicans to take back the House. And we had Louis Gohmert, who was congressman from Texas at the time, and he was, I loved Louis. He is great. He gave some of us, about 10 of us, a private tour of the U.S. Capitol. And it was the most moving thing and moving tour I had ever been on. And a lot of us, because Louis would give us he would give us behind the scenes. This is what happened. He would give us information that you don't get on a tour. And we knew when we had that tour, it was projected that the Republicans took control of the House, and that was the Tea Party wave. I mean, we picked up a record number of seats. And so we knew that all of us, we had to go by Nancy Pelosi's office and look and take one last picture where it said Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House. And everybody wanted to do it. But it was moving. I mean, we accomplished that. We changed a lot of the narrative in America, and we made America, and we're still making. Tea Party Patriots is still going. I haven't been on the board, on the main board in years, but it's still effective. They help Tea Party Patriots, Jenny Beth Martin. They help with the secure elections, uh, election integrity, paper ballots. They helped hand in hand in Georgia with the Georgia Republican Party, use their resources, train people door to door, all of that. So we're all still active. You don't have to be. And here's one thing I will tell your listeners. You don't have to be a Debbie Dooley. You don't have to be a Steve. Okay? You don't have to be Debbie or Steve. You can make an effective difference. Every time you pick up the phone and you make phone calls to encourage people to vote, you're making a difference every single time. And we saw a record number. What was interesting stat about the Tea Party movement is that the overwhelming, about 60% of local coordinators were women. So the Tea Party movement, you know, got a lot of women off the couch and got women involved. But you can be effective. Pick up the phone, make a phone call, go door to door, get with some of your friends. During these elections, we've got important elections coming up in 2026. You can make a difference and be effective. You don't have to be a Debbie or Steve. You can have an impact in just your area and what you're doing. And I encourage you to do that. And don't get discouraged. Sometimes, I mean, just like with the ethics reform, that the limit on lobbyist gift we wanted passed in Georgia, the first year we tried to pass it, we didn't. They killed it, and we kept fighting, and we came back and we passed it the second year. Sometimes you're not going to see success right away, but you have to keep moving forward. You have to keep going and keep fighting.
Well, let me ask you this, because you've advocated for numerous causes in front of the Georgia state legislature.
Yes.
Do you find the legislature to be receptive, or do you have
It,
to
it
bring them kicking and screaming?
Well, it depends on what it is. And I'm pretty good about dragging them kicking and screaming. All of us are, especially when they tried to pass that mental health bill. There were a lot of things that legislature that we were able to kill in the Georgia legislature. And of course, they weren't happy. But I would like to think I listen. One of the most important things when you're talking to legislators is be courteous and listen to what they have to say and keep an open mind. That doesn't mean you don't have to push back and say in a polite manner, I disagree with that. But you've got to understand, if you go after these legislators and you're trying to get things passed, it's not going to do any good if you cuss them out all the time. I mean, if you criticize them when they do wrong, you also have to criticize them when they do right, when they do what you want. And a lot of people don't understand the dynamics in that because, I mean, I've fought David Ralston pretty hard almost since he was speaker. And, I kept fighting. I'm just like, hey, elected officials put their shoes on or their pants on one leg at a time, just like everybody else does. And you have to learn, how to talk to them, how to be firm, and then there's times that you have to be nice and praise them, and you have to balance it out.
So when you challenged, because you mentioned that in a sentence that you led the challenge against Speaker of the House David Ralston.
Yeah.
You said that very nonchalantly, but I think people need to recognize how big of a challenge doing something like that is. And I want to know, while you were in the middle of that effort, and of course he did end up winning his reelection, but while you were in the middle of that effort, calling for his dismissal in the primary, y'all had a candidate, you were running a candidate against him and everything. Did you ever think during that period, oh my God, if we lose this, I'll never get another thing done in the legislature? Did you ever have those doubts or those thoughts in your mind?
No, because here is the thing. I never did, and it wouldn't have, you know, it would not have discouraged me from doing it because here's the thing, legislators have to go home to their districts, and I had connections with folks in the districts. And with David Ralston, I mean, tried to get us to force us to register as lobbyists if we go to the Capitol and just talk to our elected officials. We had these buttons printed up to say that we are not lobbyists and stuff like that. And we won that battle because of Josh McCoon. In a lot of the battles with David Ralston, Josh McCoon was, he was our champion. He stood up and he knew that it would cost him his political career, but he still stood up for the grassroots. You can't be afraid with David Ralston. Hey, I wasn't dependent on staying in his good graces. So I did what I thought was the right thing. And I will say that we, uh, towards I think the last year before he got sick, when we were trying to get the legislature in 2021 to pass tough election integrity legislation, uh, uh, Ralston and I had a private meeting in his office to talk about it. And we had a heart to heart talk and understood each other. Did that mean, that I wasn't going to go after him or, be critical of him if he did wrong? No, but we understood, we came to an understanding, at that point. And he went on, he was one of the only, uh, elected officials, the senior elected official in March of 2020 when Brad Raffensperger, uh, pushed through a plan to send absentee ballot applications to 6.9 million registered voters in Georgia. Send them without requesting or anything. And I tried to stop it because I said it's going to hurt us in November because it will allow the left to fine tune how to cheat using absentee ballots. I fought it. David Ralston stood up and he fought it too. He was one of the ones that actually fought it as well. He was the only one to actually fought it. So we were on the same side with that. And he tried to stop it, but Raffensperger ignored it, and it did impact the election, the November election, because it allowed the Democrats to fine tune how they're going to cheat with absentee ballots. And, a lot of times in Georgia, if you're over 65 and you fill out an absentee ballot for the primary, there's a check mark that will allow you to fill out the absentee ballot and say, send me absentee ballots for the rest of this election cycle. And that's what a lot did, but it was the Dominion machines that hurt us, but it was also the absentee ballots really killed us in November of 2020.
It
And
was,
we tried to stop it.
yeah, it was so funny with Ralston. Um,
Yeah.
I supported him at first when he became speaker, got behind him and supported him because the previous speaker had just gone crazy and was doing stuff he
Yeah.
shouldn't have been doing. Ralston came in as a reformer, but he quickly turned in from reformer to old guard standard bearer. And I remember I was on the Fayette County Board of Commissioners and I was speaking out in favor of some of the ethics legislation. And there was a forum, and you could raise your hand. They want you to introduce yourself and ask a question. And so I raised my hand and I said, "Hi, I'm Steve Brown. I'm a commissioner with Fayette County." And immediately, right after I said that, before I started asking my question, Ralston, in that gravelly baritone voice, said, "I know who you are." And I thought to myself, "Oh boy, this could kick me later, you know." But luckily, I had a lot of legislative people in Fayette County who were his floor leaders, so I had a lot of leverage back then. But I heard him say, "I know who you are," and I'm like, "Okay, here we go." But
Well,
let
it's
me
funny you
go ahead.
let me add this while you were still talking about Ralston. Uh, First time I called him out, when not long after he was elected speaker, he went on a European vacation to study high-speed rail in Europe that was paid for by lobbyists. And so I started raising awareness. AJC called me about a quote. I gave him a quote. I opposed it. I thought it was horrible. So, so I have not, through the history with Ralston, we've been at odds more than we've agreed. But the key is to never stop fighting. You just never knew. Look what happened with Donald Trump. People, after 2020, the election was stolen, people just counted him out. They said, okay, Republicans, some of the Bush Republicans did not want him to run, and they counted him out. And he said, no, I'm going to stand and fight. Nobody thought he would win. I did. I thought it was part of God's plan somehow uh, for him to lose. And, it's just disheartening that he lost, but I kind of saw what could happen down the road. I stuck by him. I fought for him. And when everybody was saying, oh, he shouldn't run, look at everything this man's went through, and he still fought for us. And he's still fighting for us. But look, in 2020, it was doom and gloom. We had Dementia Joe, basically a living vegetable, as our president. And I think God allowed that to happen to show America who Democrats really, really were under the Biden administration. Trump came in, he said, I'm a fighter, I'm running. And who would have thought in 2021 that he would achieve such a sweeping victory? Donald Trump has changed America. And it's because a lot of the people that support him have stayed loyal to him, including me, through all this time. I went through some battles. In 2016, a lot of my friends supported Ted Cruz. I endorsed Trump. They attacked me. They were saying, oh, he's not a Republican and all that. And I fought for him. I fought to prevent the Cruz campaign from stealing the GOP nomination for him.
You know,
And I mean, you just never know. You have to keep fighting.
the thing about Trump, he's steady. You pretty much know the way he's going to approach something. And I'm talking about
Yeah.
publicly, his persona. You pack a pretty powerful political punch. You You're blunt about the issues. You tell it like it is, what's ever on your
Yeah.
mind. Did you ever have a time where you use that approach on an issue and you say, I wish I had pulled that back and done something else instead?
Think of anything because it's just my nature. I mean, I'm bold. I fight for what I believe in. But there have been times that I have decided, hey, the bull in the china shop, I made the decision beforehand. This bull in the china shop approach is not going to work in this situation. And and then I changed the course and was nice. So, and I got, I was successful. So, but yeah, I mean, it's your nature, but I do stop and think is that I spent 15 years in information technology. I'm a very analytical person. So I'll look at something and I'll say, what is the best approach in this situation? And I think that was good to do that. And you just have to look and analyze each situation. But no, I haven't never gone and said, oh, I wish I hadn't come on that strong. But I did alter my approach before I started, if that makes sense.
Sure, that makes perfect sense. Let's talk about the 2025 State Republican Party Convention, okay?
Okay.
Um, Comments all over X, Facebook, any platform, Truth Social, you name a platform, there's comments related to that convention on their platform. So I read some comments in Facebook, and let's talk about some of these.
Okay.
I've had people say on Facebook, and I've actually had some people tell me in person who were at the convention, and they said it was their first state convention and it was going to be their last. They described the convention as being circus like. What would be your take on the state convention?
Well, obviously, it was their first state convention, or they would not be saying it's circus like, because I've gone to every Georgia Republican Party state convention since 2003. A lot of times, sometimes it goes smooth, sometimes it's circus like, but I've never seen um, a lot of the just negative attacks, and that really bothered me. Folks were attacking the Georgia Republican Party last year, and they started attacking it this year. This is the primary get out the vote mechanism they're attacking. And some of the attacks that I saw take place this year, the Democrats were using it against the Republican Party. But a convention, politics, yeah, I will tell you emphatically, politics is not for the faint of heart. You've got to have a tough skin. And at this convention, there was no cheating. We abided by the rules. We did everything by the rules. Of course, uh, being, most of us had been to a ton of state conventions. We knew what to expect. We studied the convention rules. We know Robert's Rules of Order and all that, and we were better prepared than, say, David Cross's people. And we did not feel like, as far as the paper ballots, I mean, you had David Cross supporters actually talked about and push using paper ballots when and be in charge of counting them, and that was crazy to me. I support paper ballots. I support for public elections, but it was crazy. It'd be like the Fulton County say, hey, we're going to move to paper ballots, but you know what? We're going to use the Fulton Democrats ballots, and we're going to put the Fulton Democrats in charge of the election and counting ballots. That was the same thing. And we knew that we wanted, I was in line at the microphone. I stood up there for 4 hours. But everything was according to the convention rules, according to the rules of the Georgia Republican Party, because we just knew them better and we took advantage of our knowledge of the rules. But the thing is, the body actually voted when there was a call to question quickly. called a question when the convention rules were announced that included using the clickers. We immediately called to the question. Well, if the body knew what they were voting on. Mike Crane just made the statement, said this is what's going on, and the convention body voted to adopt the rules. And once they, with the call a question, and then they voted overwhelmingly, call a question, and then to adopt the rules. I knew at that point that Josh and some of the people I've supported were going to win because it was very lopsided. Only a third of the people did not want the call to the question or anything. So it just moved the convention along a lot faster instead of sitting there arguing back and forth. And the
Well,
will of the convention was done because if the votes had not been there, it would have been voted down.
let me
And,
let let me add this for the viewers, Debbie, because we're pulling out names here, and our viewers are not all Republican insiders. So when she says
okay,
when she says Josh McCoon, who is the current
sorry,
chair,
Josh McCoon.
he was the previous uh, party chairperson. He got voted in as now the current chairperson of the Republican Party. He was formerly a state senator. And then
Yeah,
David Cross, who she's talking about, David Cross was formerly a second vice chair on the board
yeah.
of the Republican Party of the state. And then he was running against Josh McCoon for the chairmanship, just so people understand the logistics. So we put
Understand,
all
I
that together.
forget. I'm glad you reminded me of that. It's Josh McCoon. And I will say that, in fact, in 2023, we used the same clickers that we used this convention. David Cross won, Brant Frost lost, and Brian Pritchard won. Last year, we used the same clickers, and Amy Kramer was elected Republican National Committee woman. So the clickers were a lot faster. People didn't want to sit there waiting for hours and hours to count the ballots. And trust me, when Nathan Deal was elected governor, uh, when he was elected governor, I think it was in 2011 is when our state convention was, and he was pushing his candidate to be Georgia Republican Party chairman. We did not want her. We wanted Sue Everhart, who was the current chairman. And we had paper ballots that year, and it took forever to count them through the election. You're talking about if there's runoffs and all that. And the will of the convention was they wanted to use the clickers. And the clickers were not managed by anybody in the Republican Party. The vendors managed the clickers, not someone in the Republican Party. They managed get the Republican Party managed giving them out,
Okay,
but
so let me catch this up too, because people aren't going to know what a clicker is. A
that's how
clicker,
we voted.
yeah, a clicker, just for the audience perspective, they had everybody had been vetted and qualified to be in the state
Yeah,
convention. So what they did was they gave each voting delegate who is eligible to vote something that looked similar to, let's just say, a remote control for your television that has a couple of buttons on it. Via Wi-Fi, it will cast your vote to a computer. The computer will tally, and then the results come up on the screen fairly quickly. So when Debbie says clicker, that is the device they were using to try to do that. Now, on the Nathan Deal thing, I remember when Nathan Deal got booed right off the stage that year.
yeah.
And Brian Kemp didn't show up to the convention this year. Do you think he didn't do it because there were some maybe non-popular issues related to him, or why? Why do you think the governor didn't show?
Well, in 2021, I actually organized efforts to get folks to boo Brian Kemp when he spoke at the convention 2021. He was booed loudly. Press reported on it across across the world. Press reported on it. I guess he figured he didn't want to come back. And he wasn't sure what would happen. But yeah, I led organized efforts to boo Brian Kemp, organize, in 2021, organized efforts to get county and district parties to pass resolutions censoring Brian Kemp, Brad Raffensperger, and Chris Carr. And so they passed in a lot of counties. So I'm not surprised Governor Kemp has not attended a convention, I think, since 2021, if
Now,
I'm
now,
not mistaken.
now let me ask, because you'd mentioned this, the convention, just for people that don't know, uh, right at the beginning of the convention, the delegates vote on the rules for the convention. That's just traditional. It's done every year. I think the Democrats do the same thing, if I'm not mistaken. But you have a set of convention rules, and then you have a chairman who is not the chairman of the Republican Party. It's a chairman that's voted by the delegates to lead that convention. Now, a lot of people, a good number of people, they complain that when they made the motion to pass the rules and they did a quick call the question, didn't allow anybody a chance to really speak or debate, that was dirty dealing. So what's your response to that?
Well, how is it dirty dealing when the convention body voted overwhelmingly uh, to pass the convention rules? You had people that wanted to get up and just drone on for hours and get in an argument. And we were concerned about people leaving and all of that. And we wanted the delegates to have their say and to get what they wanted. So that wasn't dirty. It would have been dirty for to force them to sit there and listen to arguments back and forth and then vote overwhelmingly to do what they did anyway, which is to call the question, vote for the convention rules. And Josh McCoon he could have stayed up there as chairman of the Republican Party. There's nothing that required, hey, somebody else has to be appointed. And I think what he did is he temporarily gave that to Mike Crane. And, because we were talking about the elections, but here's the thing that has to take place first. And I heard a lot of criticism, people saying, oh, they just kept delaying. They kept delaying by getting all these elected officials to speak, and it caused it to go on. The elected officials spoke, uh, during the time where we could not cast a vote because you have to get a quorum. You have to get alternates seated to make sure all the delegates, you get alternates moved up to delegates. You've got to wait for that process to complete before you can, to get the voting strength before you can legally cast a vote. So the elected officials and all the speeches were done while we were waiting on the credentials report. And it would be dirty to sit there and not to allow the majority of the convention to go ahead and vote and get it out of the way if they wanted to. It wouldn't have changed the vote because it was so overwhelmingly.
Let me go ahead. I'm going to put a slide. I'm going to put my slide number 1 up here. This is a quote that we heard often, and I really want to get your. I think it says the chair of the convention should not be biased and not give their personal commentary or sarcastic comments to the voting body if they do not agree with their comments. So one of the things that we heard a lot was we heard that the person, and this is not Josh McCoon, this is the person who was, the
Mike
chair,
Crane.
the proxy chair at the time, was making negative comments about some of the candidates running for the state party posts. Is that morally right? I mean, ethically, I don't think there's any problem with it. You can say whatever you want to say, but should they not be giving more of an appearance of unbiased type of behavior if they're going to be up there on the stage in an official capacity?
Well, are you talking about the nominating committee? Because I did not hear Mike Crane give a lot of those comments like that. I mean, I heard him say, well, you know, the lights can be so bright you can't see in the audience to call on people. And I don't remember him saying that. Of course, I was at the microphone, but I don't remember him doing that. And I do know that, you know, with the chair of the nominating committee, they got up and they gave their report because, uh, you know, like last year, we had a lot of stuff about they were received letter about Amy Kramer, the nominating committee, about the FEC funds. They withheld that from the delegates of the convention until after they voted. So I guess this nominating committee did not want to make the same mistake. Like in 2023, there were things that were given about Brian Pritchard that would have caused the convention, if they had used it, probably not to elect him. And I mean, they had to end up removing him because a lot of the stuff about voting illegally 9 times came out. And I would think the nominating committee did not want to make that same mistake that they made in prior years of withholding information they had from the delegates. And this is not something that hasn't gone on before. I would encourage the first time folks to attend a convention, go back in 2027 and keep going. And first time I attended one was 2003. And I was like, I didn't know what was going on, but I asked. I've got a copy of the rules. I knew Robert's rules, so I would know what's going on. But uh, I mean, if I didn't hear
Well, Debbie, right there.
Mike Crane say anything.
Let's go to slide number. Let me put in slide number 2 because this is related to some of the things you're talking about too. So
Yeah.
they were talking about, you know, the nominating committee, and that the nominating committee chairman, a woman by the name of Katie Frost, was
Yeah.
giving. And I saw the videos of her talking up on stage. Plenty of people had their phones rolling, but she was giving disparaging remarks about the people. Now, this is kind of even more. I think what exacerbated this was that one of the candidates, David Cross, who was running for chairman, and the Frost family were kind of in a, let's just say, an inside Republican feud where they went after each other in the 3rd congressional district debates, you know, for the party officers. And a lot of people thought, you know, and they were making comments about each other, but a lot of people thought she brought that up on the official stage, those disparaging remarks. Should that have been done or not?
Agree with it being done because the delegates have a right to know who they're voting on. And if there's anything out there, I would have preferred a report to be given out to the actual delegates way ahead of time and have everything written down. But I think delegates have a right to know. And, you know, like I said, in prior conventions, the last 2 prior, there were folks elected that information, and the nominating committee, because I was one of the ones that was upset with the nominating committee, especially last year, is the delegates have a right to know before they cast their vote, and the nominating committee should not withhold the information
Do you
on this.
do you think in cases like that where where the party officials who are running the convention, who know that there has been bad blood between the Frost family and one of the candidates, should they have asked somebody other than Katie Frost to give the nomination? Especially, I'm just saying for the chairman's race, because they were fighting with a chairman's candidate. Should they have given somebody else the note card and have them read it off when they were giving the
No,
slate because of that?
No, I don't think so because she was chairman of the nominating committee. And if someone wants to act like a little crybaby and cry, that that's what went on with David Cross. I mean, this guy tried to appeal it. I mean, there are things with David Cross that my issues that I've had with him is that uh, he actually tried to serve me with a cease and desist because I was bringing out information on him. And he is just not, I definitely do not think he has the personality or the mentality to be chairman of the Georgia Republican Party because sometimes he acts like a big baby. And I'll be brutally honest when I say that.
Well, let me go to slide number 3 here. This came up in the convention, and it's been a hot potato. The Brad Raffensperger resolution, and just for people who are viewing who may not know the political steps, Raffensperger is our Republican Secretary of State for the state of Georgia, and he's held that post for 4 years and gone through a bunch of ups and downs with elections. You can remember the Trump recorded phone call with Brad Raffensperger, and there was a resolution that had gone through all the counties for approval to send to the state convention. And it said that they were not going to recognize, if the resolution was approved, they were not going to recognize Raffensperger as a Republican, and they were not going to qualify him as a Republican. Now, the current chairman, and he was the past chairman this past time, Josh McCoon, says he's not going to honor that resolution and that he can't. What's your take on that, Debbie?
Totally agree with Josh. I think it is ridiculous. Georgia law is very clear. This is all part of GRA's accountability rule that prohibits folks that they don't like or candidates from even qualifying to run in the primary. I have been going after Brad Rattensperger, and that's what I call him. I even had this little cartoon of a rat made up Brad Raffensperger since March of 2020. We can't, Georgia law is very specific. The party would be sued if they tried to say you can't qualify as a Republican. And even more, if he were stopped qualifying as a Republican, he would just go and qualify as an independent. He's got a big war chest and run as an independent in the general election and take votes away from Republican candidates. I'd rather defeat him in the primary. I don't believe it's right for a small group, especially the county parties, to say, oh no, like they did in Catoosa, you can't qualify to run as a Republican. And these were sitting county commissioners that they did that to. And I think it's wrong because of what Georgia law says. I think it's up to the voters to decide who they want to represent them in the general election. And as long as you meet the qualifications, you should be allowed to run. Now, I look forward to working hard to defeat Rattensperger, no matter what he runs for, but we should not block him from qualifying as a Republican because it will come back and bite our Republican candidates in the butt in November of 2026 if we do.
Well, let me go to slide number 4. This comes off of your Facebook page, and
Yeah.
This is Debbie Dooley now with the little devils and the laughter on top. Now, I thought now this is Debbie Dooley. She takes the criticism, she posts it, and says a little gotcha with the little gotcha icons on the top of the page. This when the devil came down to Georgia. And her name was Debbie Dooley.
I was proud of that.
I tell people this when they ask me about Debbie Dooley. I said, she's going to take that as a badge of honor. I said, I'm going to talk to her about it in the interview, but she's going to take this as a badge of honor. Now, the microphones. a lot of people have talked about the microphones at the state convention. They said you and Tim Ryan and Brant Frost were blocking the microphones, keeping people from speaking. And I did see video of you standing near the microphones, and we had a group of people all standing around the microphones. What was the deal with the microphone?
We did what we were allowed to do. The whole thing is, we outmaneuvered them because we were experienced. Everything we did, it was planned. And we had experience, and they could have shouted. The bottom line is, after a certain point, we left. Our main point was to make sure that we used clickers and that the convention rules passed. And I do see it as a badge of honor, because I go into things like this just like a general planning to go into battle. I make sure I look at all the ammunition we have, what the rules of engagement are, and all that. That's just me. And by the way, George Patton is my favorite general of all time. And that's what I did. I loved it. It was a badge of honor to see all these people out there crying, because uh, we were the ones that were victorious, and it was a team effort. There was a lot of untrue and false information that was put out. Like, people were claiming, Brian Pritchard on his radio show, or his show, would claim, "Oh, Debbie Dooley's being paid to go after me." No, I'm not. I've not been paid to go after anybody. That I do it as a public service. This is my hobby. I do it as a public service. I am not being paid. I'm not on Brian Kemp's payroll. I'm not a fan of Brad Rattensperger. I mean, that's the most ridiculous thing anybody could say. It. I'm the one that broke the story that Jordan Fuchs is the one that illegally recorded that phone call with Trump when she was visiting her grandparents in Florida. That was me. I went to the media and broke it. So, I mean, some people say the most asinine things ever that don't know what's going on. But yeah, I was proud of that. I still have it. I actually printed it out, and I'm getting it laminated to turn into a picture.
Well, I wouldn't doubt it, seeing that you put it on your Facebook page. Hey, let's
Yeah.
talk about the battle between the Georgia Republican Party and the Georgia Republican Assembly. Two separate
Assembly. Yep.
organizations for viewers who are not familiar with all of this. There was an organization called the Georgia Republican Assembly. It was set up years ago. It was kind
Yep.
of, and you correct me if you think I'm missing the point on GRA. GRA was kind of set up because there were Republicans in the state Republican Party who did not think the party was paying attention to them, that they were looking out for special interests beyond the will of the people. And they brought some steam and some muscle to the GRA, got the membership up, and they were going to be kind of an influence organization on the Republican Party by using strength of numbers. Is that a fair?
Keep in mind, I was one of the founding members of GRA. There were a group of us, and Josh was one of them, Josh McCoon. I was one of the founding members when it was first started. And it was started because the role of the Republican Party is to elect Republicans, not hold Republican elected officials accountable. That's up to auxiliary groups. That's why the Tea Party started. That's why Main Street Patriots and America First Tea Party. That's why I have those groups, to hold elected officials accountable. Because it's not the job of the Republican Party, it's their job to elect Republicans. And so that's why we formed this auxiliary group. In fact, I'll have to send it to you at some point. But while I was a member of GRA a few years ago, when Karl Rove was coming to speak at the convention, I had little fans made up that said "Beware of Rhino," and I've got a picture of it in front of the GRA booth with me holding it because they told us we couldn't take signs in there when Karl Rove spoke. So adapt, improvise, overcome. I came up with the idea of the fans. I said, look, they'll let us take fans in. So, we let people fold them like the signs like a fan. When they get in, they could hold the sign up. And that was in front of the GRA booth. It was great, but under the leadership, they were actually going in to local chapters. And, like there were instances where the local chapter denied folks to be members. They were screening them. They said, no, that's not a good fit. We're not going to allow you to be a member. And Alex Johnson and Nathaniel Dornell would go to those local parties and said, no, you got to accept it as membership. So it was very top down. It turned into a power grab, especially since they started pushing the accountability rule. And, that was wrong what they were doing, pushing it. And then you had Nathaniel Dornell, who is the president of GRA. He actually wrote an op-ed in 2008 opposing Sarah Palin from being a vice president, becoming vice president, because it would cause young girls not to want to stay in the home and be a helpmate for their husbands. It would cause young girls to want to go out and have their own career. 2008, I've got it. Nathaniel Dornell is frequently attacks log cabin Republicans. He calls them sodomites and all that. And, there's no place for that in today's Republican Party for that kind of behavior. And I started encouraging people to turn, resign their membership. And I started doing that in March of this year, because I started pointing out they had lost their way. And what once was a good thing was not. It was just a big power grab for folks.
Well, let me ask you this. It seems to me like every time the Republican Party, and that could be, your local, state, or your national Republican Party, gets some momentum going, like what we're seeing with closing the border and,
Yeah,
dealing with Iran and all these things like this, whenever we get momentum going, that seems to be the time when crisis and division always occurs within the party. Why do you think that is?
it's just people fighting for power. And for me, I have never been about power. My heart is of a public servant. Even though I have some power, but I mean, my email list is pretty big, but it's always to serve the public. I have a 16-year-old grandson. I want his future to be incredible. I want his future to be one of a secure country where you don't have to worry about our borders being overrun by criminals. I want him to have choice. I want his future to be better. And so you have to fight for this. And it's always been this way. I've been involved a Republican activist since 1977. Well, 1976. That's when I was in high school. And I can tell you there's always been infighting. People act like what's going on now is new. It's not. In 1976, at the Republican National Convention in Kansas City, Missouri, you had Gerald Ford was after Nixon resigned, he was the president, stepped up into the presidency, had Gerald Ford running, and Ronald Reagan actually ran against Gerald Ford. That was his first time he ran for, for president. And in Kansas City, I had a lot of people that I knew that were there. And they told me it was a floor fight, that it was actually really fights, hit knuckles broke out on the convention floor between the Ford people and the Reagan people. So having controversy, divided party, it's been around for years. It's nothing new, but we have to come together and we have to think of the future of our children, grandchildren, and great grandchildren. And we must take back the Senate seat next year. We need to unite and work to defeat who the real enemy is, and that's Democrats, not other Republicans. We have to unite and have a common goal at victory. We've got to elect people and nominate people that could actually win a general election and beat Ossoff. Governor, I'm supporting Burt Jones. He's my choice for governor. I think he's going to have Trump's endorsement, but a Republican governor is far better than a Democrat governor. We have to join forces and work our way to victory.
Let me put up my slide number 6 here at some of the GRA leadership comments and just get some feedback from you. So, she said what they said in that email that you had sent out to people. You had said that the GRA was under the control of the Frost family. What makes you say that? Just out of curiosity.
Just out of curiosity, because of the fact that the Frost family were one of the founding, one of the founders, when I came in, and they were giving probably a ton of money to support GRA, and I'm talking tens of thousands of dollars to support GRA anytime they needed money. The Frost family would come through. You had Brant that was in leadership. You had Katie was in leadership. The Krista Frost, the mother, was in leadership. And I mean, they were integral at the GRA nominating committee, nominating convention. You had GRA members that were newer. GRA members get up and attack the Frost family, including David Cross, attack the Frost family. And it was way overreach when they did that. And at the endorsement convention, what they did is they set the rules of the convention to where you could change the rules and what the rules are for runoffs. They had it to where you could change the voting, the way voting's done, right in the middle of the game. And they had that rule. And all the way through, I mean, they were attacking the Frost family from the floor. They didn't put a stop to it. All the way through, they were, like I said, David Cross got up there front and part of his speech.
Now, Debbie,
This is the thing. Go ahead.
Let me clarify, because you're saying they a lot, and I just want the viewers to know who they is. Now, I'm
sorry.
Yeah. So, are you saying that it was Alex Johnson and Nathaniel Darnell that was are they
Yep.
were they in this thing?
Yeah, the top leaders of GRA, and they would come in like for chairman. GRA's rules had you've got to get 2/3 of the vote to get the nomination. So chairman, between David Cross and Josh McCoon, neither guy got 2/3. So it was no nomination for that. First vice chair, no one got 2/3. So it was no nomination for that. Second vice chair, it was, I think Noreen Cantor ended up getting 2/3.
Yes.
And it went through to where, the runoff, I think there were 4 people running, and you knock one off, you have runoffs, and then it got down to just 2 people. And no one got 2/3. So, Noreen got 2/3, so she got the nomination. it came to secretary, uh, and for the race for secretary, there were multiple people running, and there was nobody could get 2/3. There was no nomination. Treasurer, Lori McLean ended up getting. There was just 2 people in it. She got the nomination. It got down to assistant secretary. Assistant secretary was Kylie Kramer, uh, it was Caroline Jeffords and Jaquan Stambridge, and you really should have him on your show. He is an incredible young man. Jaquan Stambridge. First round, there was Caroline dropped out. So it was between Kylie and Jaquan. Neither one got 2/3 of the vote. So with all the other races, it would seem that you would have to, there would be no endorsement. Somebody, a member, one of Kylie Kramer's folks likely got up and said, I make a motion that we drop Jaquan and Kylie runs against no endorsement. They didn't treat any of the other races like that. And they did that, and that's the only way Kylie Kramer got 2/3 of the vote, not running against no one, and they gave her the endorsement. So, I mean, that was not right. You don't change the voting rules right in the middle of the game. And I thought that was wrong for them to do that.
Well, let me go to my slide number 7 here. And I want to pose a question with this slide. I think this was from your email that you sent. Okay, let me ask you this. Are we now in a position where we have the Georgia Republican Party, the GRA, the Georgia Republican Assembly, and then these people that you've listed here, David Cross and Amy and the others, who didn't get really a nod from either one of them? Is there like a triangle going on now in terms of, where the party is? Because it seems like you've got the people that some people wanted, but were not, given the golden chalice from either organization. And then you've got the other two, and they're throwing their candidates in there who they're giving formal endorsements to. Are we stuck in a triangle now?
We're stuck in a triangle. It's just that the attacks have continued. David Cross appealed. There were that's one of the things when we were talking about the strategy. We wanted to make sure everything was done, that everything was legal, it couldn't be challenged. And David Cross appealed it. Well, there's no appeal mechanism once the state convention adjourns. There's no appeal mechanism available. Like if a county convention, well, you can appeal it to a district convention and then appeal it to the Georgia Republican Party Appeals Committee. There's nothing in place like that to appeal what happens at the state convention. But an appeal was filed. They were filled with lies and attacks. I have never seen a convention cycle like this before.
Well,
I've been going to them since 2003. Never seen
Let
it.
me ask you this, Debbie, because you put in here that they pushed a campaign of misinformation. What was the misinformation for everybody watching? What was the misinformation they were pushing?
A lot of the misinformation was that Josh McCoon, Chairman McCoon, was on the payroll of Kemp, and he does work for the state, but saying he's on the payroll of Kemp and Kemp is calling the shots is like saying every state employee is on the payroll of Kemp. Because if you're a state employee, he's the governor, he's the top guy, that's the top boss. They put information about, for example, they took out of some of the FEC reports about a meal that it was an expensive meal. I think it was in Arizona, and say, oh, he went out high on the hog. That's not what happened. I mean, the meal was so expensive because they were like 7 or 8 people that were volunteers, and he wanted to take them out to eat because they put in a lot of volunteer time. And so you have stuff like that claiming crazy stuff. I remember when I remember in, I think it was last year, when Brian Pritchard, they were meeting to remove Brian Pritchard as first vice chair of the party. They were meeting, headed at this fraternal organization, and there were rumors. They were saying, oh, there was a Halloween party that take place there, and kids were, like horrors and cages and stuff. And they sent out the stuff saying this is what happened. They had children in cages at the meeting. So it's just been a lot of stuff like that. And the truth is fair game. And there were some accidental things that Josh had already paid back, that he used the wrong credit card. He had already paid back. They didn't say any of that. I mean, they were going around saying that I was on the payroll of Brian Kemp. Brian Kemp, of all people, that I mean, just telling lies from one end to another. Sally Grubbs, just constant lies about her and what was going on. And it's just, it was, I've never seen one like this, where you have all, I mean, I was spending a lot of my time actually defending and pointing out the outrageous lies that are out there. And it was wrong to do that because the Democrats picked it up. And what they were saying, they were actually sharing it on X. And that's wrong. I mean, there were so many instances of where just outright lies that were being told. I know about me, about Sally Grubbs, about other members of the executive board, including Chairman McCoon. There's stuff going out there about Candace Taylor and all that. And, just a lot of things that are just not true that they were putting out. It had gotten ridiculous for them to say that, just like they're saying now. They're going around saying that the clickers weren't reliable, that they cheated, they weren't accurate. And I took screenshots of all of those comments and sent them to the vendor that actually managed the clickers. I mean, we didn't even, Josh, nobody with the Republican Party handled the voting or the clickers. It was the vendor that did it. And I mean, to claim that the convention was stolen, it was the most lopsided election for chairman in 30 years. The most lopsided election in 30 years. And they're going to try to say, oh, it was cheating going on. That's not true.
Well, let's switch gears. Your solar energy advocacy.
Yeah.
What got you on the solar power bandwagon?
Well, I haven't done that since probably 2019, but originally, I'll be brutally honest, it was a fight with Georgia Power over Plant Vogtle. I saw Georgia Power sitting there, and keep in mind, they make a profit off of the construction cost. They get interest rates or whatever you call it. They get on top of their construction cost. And the Plant Vogtle, the nuclear reactors, were behind schedule. It was a boondoggle, and Georgia Power was allowed to bill customers in advance before the units even came online. And I just thought that was wrong. I mean, a monopoly, uh, I believe in unplugging monopolies, because a monopoly, actually there's no incentive for them to save money because they recoup their cost of investment plus an additional percentage on top of that from the ratepayers. So why should they be fiscally responsible in these? That's what induced me to start looking at bringing in more competition, more choice. Uh, solar power fit that bill. As a matter of choice, I oppose mandates. I don't support all these subsidies and all that. But I looked at it and I said, look, I believe I help farmers in South Georgia. I went down and talked to them and met with them that actually wanted to take their farmland that they couldn't farm for so many years, that was dormant, and bring up solar farms and sell excess power to their neighbors or to businesses nearby. Georgia Power stood in the way of that. And I just believe it's time to unplug monopolies unless if you want to bring up solar powers, put it on your rooftop, I believe you should have the right to do that and to sell the excess power to your neighbors if you so choose. And
So
that's what got me involved.
So expansion of nuclear and the plant Vogel, good idea or bad idea?
Bad idea.
Let's talk about this too. Because you're advocating for solar and you've got this green tea coalition and the conservative
Yep.
movement and stuff like this, you got lumped in with the climate alarmist narratives.
Right.
Okay. I saw a couple of interviews with you and so I looked up some articles and you were kind of giving a refrain that I am not a climate change person, but here's how you get conservatives interested. You want to go a little,
Right.
Tell us a little bit about that philosophy.
It was like, the left wanted to advance solar and they couldn't understand why conservatives weren't interested. And I said, well, don't advance with climate change because our climate's always been changing since the earth was formed. I said, most conservatives don't agree with that. You talk about choice and freedom. That's the way you get conservatives to pay attention is choice and freedom. And that, I mean, I kept pounding that message home, and I strongly believe that today. I flew to, I think it was Milan, Italy, and spoke to conservative members of the European Parliament. The conservative message for solar is innovation and freedom and choice. Uh, will help protect our climate, help protect our world, not mandates. And it was always, we should be good stewards as Christians of God's creation and not destroy it. But don't go out and talk about windmills, which I've never been a fan of windmills that help destroy the whales and the sharks, and they kill birds too. So let's talk about freedom and choice. Don't say climate change. And I do believe man is causing harm to the environment. I've always believed that because, I mean, you could tell it makes sense when you have all the automobiles and all the pollution that we saw. And that was something that, I mean, you can't deny. Ronald Reagan, when he first got elected, he took solar panels down had them removed from the White House, which they weren't very accurate then. But you know what Ronald Reagan did? He said, okay, these aerosol cans are damaging the ozone layer. So we're going to ban certain aerosol cans because he believed that the damage, the ozone layer was being harmed by all these aerosol cans that you used to have before they banned it. And that was something Reagan did.
Are carbon taxes a good idea or a bad idea?
Heck no. Bad, bad, bad.
Hey, ask you too. The Georgia Record, they put
Yep,
something in there saying you were a paid employee of the U.S. Energy Foundation, and that's a climate change
yep,
NGO. Um,
yep.
what was the story with it? Are you still working for them, or what's the story with that?
Ever since I walked away in 2019, I received grants or a contractor just to put my message about, the message I just delivered is about freedom and choice and to bring conservatives and, to educate conservatives. And that was it. I mean, I received the money. I was not a paid employee. I got money as like a contractor. And I never went, not one time, against my interest. And the Georgia Record was one of these publications that actually accused Josh McCoon and other folks of keeping children in cages at that lodge event. That was Georgia Record.
Well, let me ask this before we close. What is the next project for Debbie Dooley? I know you got to have one in the hopper. So what's the next thing Debbie Dooley is going to pick up the megaphone and start talking about?
Well, I'm already going after big pharma, but I am going to, I'm going after the Chinese and then buying up farmland. Do you know that the Chinese actually pay environmental groups? They're doing it in Florida. They pay environmental groups to stop drilling for minerals in the United States because China's got the market. So they're trying to stop competition and they're paying environmental groups. Big pharma and a big thing that's on my radar now that I'll spend a lot of time is 2026 elections. We need to get ready now. We don't need to wait till November of this year to start getting ready. We need to get prepared. We need to get organized. We need to reach out to folks and we need to get prepared for 2026. That's my next biggest project is 2026.
Well, Debbie, thank you so much for carving some time out with us. You always give it like you think it. You say what's on your mind.
Yep.
I appreciate that. That's your trademark. And help us win that U.S. Senate seat. We got to get Ossoff out of there.
Got the governor's seat too. Well, I'm, like I said, I'm supporting Bert. But the good thing is what I see with the primary season, coming up next year, is that the Democrats are going to have hotly contested primaries on their end. So there's not so much mischief they could pull by crossing over and voting in the Republican primary to pick the worst candidates. So, so we have that. We don't have to worry about crossover voting and all that. And I will say that Republicans have crossed over. I remember some years ago, a lot of Republicans crossed over and helped defeat Cynthia McKinney. You remember her?
I do. She had what we called the octopus district. They went down certain roads and it went all and it looked like an octopus. They tried so desperately to give her a district where she could pick up all certain kinds of votes and avoid the other ones.
And Republicans crossed over and voted in the Democrat primary and got rid of her.
Yep. Well, Debbie, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we look forward to talking to you again. Thanks for the conversation.
Well, thank you, Steve. Keep up the great work, okay?
Thank you. Bye-bye.